you'll see that everyone bows and curtsies to the king, and no one moves a limb, a muscle, when Camilla passes.
The royal family has seen its fair share of drama, but this might be one of the most shocking turns yet. Queen Camilla, once firmly by King Charles's side, is now at the center of a storm. And it all traces back to something Princess Anne revealed. People are desperate to know what was said and why it caused such a fallout. Everything points to a major shift inside the palace walls. Could this really be the end of Camilla's role in the monarchy? Join us as we reveal why Queen Camilla was kicked out after Princess Anne broke her silence. The fall of a queen. If Queen Camilla's downfall feels sudden, it's only because the signs were ignored for too long. One of the biggest red flags came from the growing distance between the Queen and Kate Middleton. From the outside, everything might have looked calm, but behind the scenes, their relationship has been under strain for years. It is reported that Camilla wasn't always convinced Kate belonged. When Prince William and Kate were still dating, royal author Tom Quinn revealed that Camilla didn't think Kate was right for the role of future queen. Kate's middle-class roots didn't sit well with Camilla, who reportedly believed that future royals should come from the traditional upper-class circles. She also noted that Kate didn't enjoy the usual aristocratic hobbies like horse riding or hunting. To someone raised in that world, that mattered. And as time passed, Camilla may have changed her tone in public, but privately, there were signs she was never truly warm to Kate. And this tension didn't fade after Charles became king. In fact, it quietly grew stronger. Once Camilla officially became queen consort, insiders began to notice she wasn't in a hurry to hand over any spotlight. According to reports, Camilla enjoyed the attention and duties that came with her new title. She had waited a long time to stand beside Charles as queen, and she wasn't about to share that easily. This created an unspoken distance with Kate, who was slowly stepping into a more central role in the future of the monarchy. Now, this wouldn't have been an issue if Kate's popularity wasn't growing. Even before becoming Princess of Wales, she had earned public affection. Her charity work, calm demeanor, and family image made her a favorite across generations. Camilla, on the other hand, had spent years trying to win over a public that still remembered Diana. Sources close to the family said Camilla noticed the difference, and she didn't like it. While Camilla had earned her place through resilience and patience, Kate seemed to win hearts without trying. This wasn't something Camilla talked about openly, but those around them could feel it. One royal watcher even said, "Camilla couldn't stand how much people loved Kate." There were no arguments or public fallout, but there was a growing chill. They showed up to events together, smiled for cameras, and stood side by side at royal gatherings. But behind all that, their relationship remained formal and distant. And that is a problem. Because Kate isn't just another royal, she represents the future of the monarchy. So when their relationship started to break down, people inside the palace began to worry that something deeper was going wrong. After Charles became king, things changed quickly. At first, Kate kept her head down, but over time, she started skipping joint events where Camilla would be present. And that didn't go unnoticed. There was also the issue of Camilla's family. She pushed hard for her children and grandchildren to be included in royal events. This rattled a lot of people. William and Kate didn't object in public, but behind the scenes, they were upset. They felt she was overstepping. The monarchy had always been about duty, not personal favors, but Camilla's choices made it seem like she was slowly building her own version of a royal family. Reports indicate that he would sometimes not let William see King Charles. The prince grew frustrated too, though he handled it differently. Prince William, who usually stays diplomatic, was said to be growing cold in private discussions about Camilla's expanding influence. He didn't trust how quickly she was inserting her family into royal life, and he wasn't alone. Many senior royals were raising eyebrows, but few wanted to challenge her directly. All of this came to a boiling point after Kate's health became a concern. In January 2024, Kensington Palace announced that Kate had undergone abdominal surgery. No one outside the family knew how serious it really was. At first, the palace said it wasn't cancer. People assumed it was just a routine procedure and that she would be back soon. But behind the scenes, things were different. After surgery, further tests were done. And what they found changed everything. The results showed cancer, and the doctors started her on preventative chemotherapy. The palace remained silent, but public concern kept growing. Kate had disappeared from public events. There were no photos, videos, or explanations beyond that one brief statement. Finally, in March 2024, Kate released a video message where she looked fragile. Her words were honest. She said the diagnosis was a shock and that she and William had needed time to process it for themselves and for their children.
However, tests after the operation found cancer had been present. My medical team therefore advised that I should undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy.
She said they had waited to speak until the children were settled, until the worst fear had passed. It was a personal message, and it hit home. Kate had always been private. This was different. She was inviting the public in, not as a princess, but as a wife and a mother who was hurting and trying to stay strong. What the palace didn't say, but what royal insiders have since pointed out, is that Kate was already under pressure before any of this started. Her public duties had increased, her schedule was heavy, and she was also supporting her husband through the pressures of being next in line. Add to that the tensions with Camilla. Some believe it only added more weight to an already unbearable load. People close to the situation have suggested that Camilla's dismissive behavior didn't help. She had made comments in private about Kate being too sensitive and too careful. There were even whispers that she questioned Kate's strength, comparing her to other royal women. This was a clear lack of support. At the time, the royal family was already under pressure. Just as the palace was trying to manage questions about Kate, another shock hit the royal family. In February 2024, Buckingham Palace released a statement that King Charles had been diagnosed with cancer.
Palace has said King Charles spent a short period of time in hospital today after experiencing the temporary side effects of his cancer treatment.
It was caught during treatment for an enlarged prostate. What started as a routine hospital procedure had turned into something far more serious. The news came just days after the king had been seen smiling and waving to crowds outside the London clinic. He had looked well, even upbeat. So when the palace confirmed that cancer had been found, the public was stunned. They didn't say what kind of cancer it was, only that it wasn't prostate cancer. However, they made it clear he would be stepping back from public duties immediately. And unlike past generations, there was no Queen Elizabeth II holding it all together. Charles was the monarch now, and he was sick. He had only been king for a little over a year. His coronation, once a symbol of a new era, now felt like it belonged to a different moment entirely. With his health uncertain, questions started to rise about who would carry the weight of the monarchy in the months ahead. Camilla, as queen consort, was expected to step up. But it appeared she was focused on preserving her own position instead of building bridges. While Charles began his treatment, Camilla continued to attend select public events. As for Charles, he kept his schedule minimal. William started taking on more. So did Anne. And while Camilla appeared to carry on, her distance from both William and Kate became harder to ignore. The palace didn't want to admit it, but something had shifted. Charles was fighting cancer. The family needed to stand together. Instead, there were fractures, and Camilla's role in them was no longer something that could be brushed aside. And now, Kate was in treatment, too. In a time when unity mattered most, This speaks to something bigger, because when one member of the royal family is in crisis, how the others respond says everything about the bonds behind those palace walls. In this case, the silence from Camilla only confirmed what many had suspected for years. The tension between the two women was affecting the way the palace operated. And, as we're about to reveal next, that's when Princess Anne stepped in. Princess Anne's influence. As we know, Princess Anne is the second child and only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. She's known in the royal family for being direct, no-nonsense, and deeply committed to duty. While she's not always in the spotlight inside palace walls, her voice carries weight, especially during crises. Unlike others in the royal family, Anne has never chased attention. She's one of the hardest-working royals, often topping the list of public engagements each year. It is reported that in 2022, she carried out more official engagements than any other royal, including King Charles and Prince William. She holds more than 300 royal patronages and is deeply involved in military, medical, and charity work. Her no-nonsense reputation comes from years of consistent duty and less media involvement. She rarely grants interviews and is known for her blunt, practical approach. This isn't by accident. Anne believes in the traditional model of monarchy, service before status. Her loyalty lies with the crown itself, not the people running it. That independence is also why she's hard to manipulate. Over the years, aides from both Buckingham Palace and Clarence House have described Anne as someone who sees through personal agendas very quickly. She's never been close to Camilla, not hostile, but not warm either. When Charles became king, Anne accepted his wife as queen consort without protest. She continued to focus on her own duties, including her role as the colonel of the Blues and Royals, and as the head of several charities and military units. But behind the scenes, she was paying attention. Royal biographers like Robert Lacey and Penny Junor have written that Anne and Camilla were never particularly close, with Anne holding strong views about loyalty and tradition in the monarchy. As confirmed by one insider, Anne and Camilla have always had bad blood, and this is unearthing a lot of old wounds. Make no mistake, there's no hope of these royal rivals becoming friends. Junor, in her book The Duchess: The Untold Story, notes that Anne once dated Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's ex-husband, but they went their separate ways long before Camilla married Charles. On top of all that, Anne has long observed how Camilla came into the family, especially after the Diana years. After King Charles's coronation in 2023, her role largely remained unchanged, but she became more visible. She was appointed Gold Stick-in-Waiting during the coronation, a ceremonial position historically trusted with the monarch's personal security. However, Princess Anne has spoken out in subtle ways when she believes royal tradition is under threat. In interviews, she mentioned that she was not a fan of slimming down the monarchy or changing the model too drastically. "It doesn't sound like a good idea from where I'm standing," she said. This position puts her at odds with efforts by other royals, including Camilla, to reshape or modernize roles too quickly. She values continuity over influence, so, when it comes to tensions within the family, Anne's importance isn't about loud gestures. It's about structure. She serves as a balancing figure and someone whose loyalty is to the institution above all else. And while there's no verified record of her confronting Camilla directly, her authority and clarity behind closed doors continue to hold weight. In 2024, people began to notice that Queen Camilla was pulling back from some events. Officially, it looked as though she was just taking some personal rest. But the reality was harder to ignore. She had once been front and center, standing beside King Charles, visiting charities and hosting guests. Now her name started disappearing from royal calendars. In some weeks, she had no public engagements at all. The woman who once claimed she'd step up during Charles's illness was suddenly stepping away. In contrast, Princess Anne didn't slow down, even for a day. She filled in for her brother at military events, met foreign dignitaries, and traveled on behalf of the crown, all without drama. While Camilla was missing from photos, Anne's face was everywhere. Crowds cheered for her, royal supporters praised her work ethic, and some believed she was doing what Camilla had promised, but never fully delivered. Yet, no one spoke of a fight. There was no direct feud, but everyone could see the difference. It was a case of one royal staying visible by showing up, working, and proving she belonged in that space. The other was slowly fading, choosing rest, leaving gaps, and allowing others to step in. And the royal family simply adjusted. Because in the public-facing monarchy, space doesn't stay empty for long. By the time spring rolled around in 2024, the royal calendar told a story louder than any palace press release. Princess Anne reportedly carried out 31.4% of all royal engagements in just the first 4 months of 2024. That was nearly a third of the total workload, and no other royal came near her. She didn't make speeches about duty or post any emotional tributes. She just showed up again and again, doing the work. From opening hospitals to attending regimental events, Anne was everywhere. And her message was simply that the monarchy wasn't slowing down, no matter what personal battles the family was facing behind closed doors. But who else is behind the monarchy's stability? And what's next for the royal family's future and King Charles's legacy? Unsung heroes. With two of the monarchy's most visible figures suddenly sidelined, someone had to hold the line, and Anne wasn't alone. When you look closely at the royal engagements that followed, you'll notice that Prince Edward, the late Queen's youngest son, also increased his visibility. He's never been a headline maker like Charles or William, but when needed, he stepped into the spotlight. He took on ceremonial roles, shook hands at community centers, stood in for absent senior royals at key events. He did it with a calm, steady tone that reminded many of his father, Prince Philip. And right there beside him was Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. Once seen as a background figure, Sophie began standing taller in 2024. Public appearances that once went unnoticed were now seen as signs. She was stepping into spaces once held by Catherine and Camilla, meeting veterans, comforting children, and attending high-profile events where her voice, suddenly, began to carry more weight. Together, Anne, Edward, and Sophie formed what felt like an emergency task force. They didn't talk about stepping up, they just did it. And in doing so, they offered the public the consistency that felt missing all these while. In those early months of 2024, the monarchy's visibility relied on effort, and no one put in more effort than Anne. This was a shift in how the public saw the royals. With Charles and Kate both away from the spotlight for personal reasons, the burden fell on those who could carry it. Anne had always been called the hardest-working royal. Now that title became reality in front of the world. And what made it all the more powerful was how natural it seemed. No fuss, no PR storm, no drama, just work, duty, presence. By the time summer approached, royal watchers weren't just noticing how often Anne appeared. They were noticing what it meant, that this wasn't temporary, that a new dynamic was quietly forming, not just around one person, but around a group. And in the absence of the King and the Princess of Wales, the monarchy didn't falter. It adjusted. It was Princess Anne at the front, but it was also Edward and Sophie, building something solid in a moment that could have crumbled. As for King Charles, the weight of the crown has never been light. It now comes with the added burden of illness, time, and public uncertainty. In the months since his cancer diagnosis, something subtle yet unmistakable has started to unfold. He may not be center stage at every royal engagement, yet behind palace walls, Charles appears to be reshaping the monarchy with a clear determination. Close. It's no accident that Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and the Duchess of Edinburgh are everywhere. These are our loyal lieutenants, seasoned, reliable, and deeply committed to the institution. The king has long admired Anne's no-nonsense work ethic. The fact that she has taken on the bulk of royal engagements that year was a show of trust. The same goes for Edward and Sophie, who've been seen more frequently than ever, engaging with charities, supporting military events, and hosting garden parties at Buckingham Palace. But Charles didn't vanish. Instead, he evolved. He continues to meet with the Prime Minister, manage state documents, and steer the family's internal decisions. His presence, though physically limited, is still felt in every major move. In this, he mirrors his late mother. Queen Elizabeth famously worked through personal crises with a steady hand and a silent gaze. Charles, too, seems to believe that duty just needs to be fulfilled. This shift has drawn mixed reactions from members of the public. Some admire his strength, seeing it as proof that the monarchy can endure anything. They respect that he hasn't abdicated or retreated into silence, that he still shows up when it matters most. But others are uneasy. The idea of a king battling cancer while leading a centuries-old institution raises questions that many had hoped wouldn't come up for years. The public just said goodbye to Queen Elizabeth after 7 decades on the throne. Now, not even 10 years later, they're staring down the reality of another monarch whose health is fragile. It reminds us of the truth that the monarchy, despite its timeless image, is very much made of flesh and blood. Mortality doesn't skip over the crown, and with that realization comes a more pressing conversation, like what happens if Charles can't continue. The palace has been careful not to speak of contingency. There's been no official mention of regency or abdication. But the decisions speak louder than words. Charles is clearly delegating more. Events that would have been led by him are now assigned to Anne, Edward, or William. His calendar is sparse by royal standards, and behind the scenes, sources say, he's focused on his long-term plans of trimming down ceremonial excess and preparing the monarchy for its next chapter. These are not the actions of a man consumed solely with recovery. These are the moves of a king thinking about legacy. For Prince William, this brings both opportunity and pressure. Charles isn't rushing his son into the spotlight, but the path is being cleared. William's schedule is increasing, but with care. He's taking on more roles, particularly those connected to state and diplomacy. But there's restraint. Charles knows the cost of being thrust forward too early, as he lived that tension for decades under his mother's long reign. But he wants a steady transition for William. That's why Charles' reign, however long it lasts, may ultimately be for something better and more lasting. This includes quiet control, strategic delegation, and a rebalancing of the monarchy's workload in real time, under extraordinary pressure. At the age of 73, he was the oldest person to accede to the British throne, and he has adjusted, signaling a new kind of royal leadership that doesn't require constant visibility to maintain authority. He is not the public workhorse. Anne has taken that role. He is not the eager heir preparing to rise. William is slowly stepping into that space. Charles is the steady hand guiding from behind the curtain. And perhaps that's what this moment calls for. He's trying to endure, keep the monarchy intact through one of the most delicate moments in recent history. And that, in itself, is a kind of strength. What do you think? Do you see King Charles's strategy as the future of the monarchy, or will it lead something else? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear them. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.